Some of the men were sent to Egypt to work in the marble quarries, but by far the largest number of these slaves were retained for the works of the Colosseum. The number is estimated to be 30 to 50,000 men. The walls of the mighty emblem of everything gloomy and horrible were cemented with the tears of a fallen people, the Hebrew Jewish people. The construction of the Colosseum was literally, we go from the ashes of the temple in Jerusalem to the construction of that mighty Colosseum. The Colosseum, otherwise known as the Flavian Amphitheater, built in Rome between 70 and 82 AD, is believed to have been partially financed by the spoils of the Roman victory over the Jews. Literally, they raped, robbed, and pillaged Jerusalem to pay for the Colosseum. Archaeological discoveries have found a block of travertine that bears dowel holes that show the Jewish wars financed the building of this amphitheater. Judea coinage, capta coins, were a series of commemorative coins, originally issued by Vespasian, the emperor, to celebrate the capture of Judea and the destruction of the temple by his son Titus. The coins of Vespasian and Titus commemorate the conquest of Judah. The Colosseum appears on a sestertius of Vespasian. So as the menorah and the shewbread from the temple were paraded down the streets, so were 70,000 of these conquered race were brought to Rome by Titus. Having adorned his triumph, they were divided into three classes of people, mostly slaves. The spoils from Jerusalem would fund the Colosseum. The upper structures of the Colosseum were raised by materials taken from the fallen house of Caesars on the Palatine. When Vespasian and Titus gave orders for the destruction of the greater part of the house of Nero, they performed an act most pleasing to the Roman people. They gave orders to destroy Nero's home, Nero's properties, and to build the Colosseum with it. It was a monument of hateful splendor that rose on the ruins of their burned city. Its riches and its grandeur could but remind them of the tyranny and oppression of the past. No sooner was the order given than the populace joined the work of devastation. Immense boulders of gilded travertine columns and capitals, and marble cornices of the most elaborate carving, bonds of iron and of gold, and imperishable masses of brickwork were rudely and indiscriminately hurried away to the ornament to fill up the great work of the Colosseum. The mighty amphitheater itself became a ruin, and after the lapse of centuries will be stricken by the hand of time, and will in its own turn lend the material of its fallen arches to build the medieval and modern palaces of the eternal city. So literally, Jerusalem is raped and robbed and pillaged. The temple is destroyed. All of its riches and gold and silver and any riches that were in it are taken to build the Colosseum, along with its people, 70,000 of those men. But get this, one day the Colosseum would be raided to build St. Peter's Basilica. So what would come to pass that Jesus prophesied about? And when the Jews said they had no king but Caesar, how rightly they spoke. Because Caesar's empire, Pontifex Maximus's empire, will be built upon the ruins of the Temple of Jerusalem. Thus it is in history of man the greatest monuments of modern splendor have risen, said one, phoenix-like, from the ruins of the mighty structures that our ancestors vainly imagined imperishable. No one thought when Jesus told them, destroy this temple and I'll raise it up in 3 days. He was speaking of himself, and they thought he meant the temple. And they said, 40 and 6 years have we built this temple, right? 40 and 6 years have we built this temple. And they thought that Jesus was speaking of that temple, but he was speaking of the temple of his own body. But they thought that temple imperishable, right? But it wasn't. We must now take a view of the amphitheater, says one, in a perfect state. Scattered fragments of description have been collected from ancient historians, and the picture is neatly complete. Fancy can fill up many details from the ruins as they now stand. It was a beautiful elliptic figure, 564 feet in length, 467 in breadth, and it was raised on 80 immense arches and rose in 4 successive orders of architecture to the height of 140 feet. The whole building covered a space equal to 6 English acres. Imagine that. 6 acres of Colosseum. The outside was encrusted with marble and decorated with statues. The slopes of the vast concave which formed the inside were filled and surrounded with 60 or 80 rows of seats of marble, covered with cushions and capable of receiving with ease 100,000 spectators. 64 vomitories, for by that name the doors were very aptly distinguished, poured forth. This place even had public bathrooms. Immense multitudes, entrances, passages, and staircases were contrived with such exquisite skill that each person, whether a senator, an equestrian, or the lowly plebeian, arrived at his destined place without trouble or confusion. The lowest row of seats next to the arena, now completely covered by earth and debris, assigned to the senators and foreign ambassadors, was called the podium. There also on an elevated platform was the emperor's throne, lifted high above in a godlike fashion, shaded by a canopy like a pavilion, the place for the manager or the editor of the games, as he was called, or maybe you would call him the ringmaster today of a circus. He was in charge of the games. Then you would have the Vestal Virgins, were beside the emperor's seat, much like the ring girls that you see in the UFC. The podium was secured with a breastwork of parapet of gold or gilt bronze. Against the eruption of the wild beasts as a further defense, the arena was surrounded by an iron railing and a canal. The equites, or second order of nobles, sat in 14 rows behind the senators. The rest of the people sat behind on seats called popularia, rising tier above tier to a gallery with a colonnade in front, running all around the amphitheater immediately under the awning, and generally occupied by women, soldiers, and attendants. Imagine this, you're in this humongous Colosseum. Imagine on a hot, sunny day, or a cold day, or rain comes over the amphitheater. But the thirst of blood couldn't stop the games, the desire to watch men brutally murder each other, the desire to see animals slaughtered, these shows, the zoo. The show must go on, so what did they do? They had a massive canopy that would cover the entire top of the Colosseum to keep the rain and the weather and the sun out. Nothing could stop the games, the show must go on. Nothing was omitted, said one, that could in any way be subservient to the convenience and pleasure of the spectator. The immense canopy, that awning, nothing was omitted that could in any way be subservient to the convenience and pleasure of the spectators. Pleasure seekers. The immense canopy, or that awning, which at times was stretched over the entire expanse from the outer wall as a protection from that sun or rain, was one of the wonders of the Colosseum. The Colosseum is one of the wonders of the known world at the time, and still is today, even though it's a skeleton of itself. It's still a wonder to behold when you walk inside of it and see it for what it really is. And think about it, imagine what it once was. In a time when that would bring 100,000 people together to watch the show. This massive canopy required a stretch of imagination to believe. You and I have a hard time believing that those primitive people could put a canopy above that. When we stand even now in the midst of the ruins and we see the vast expanse of the heavens above us, the mind is lost in doubt and conjecture about the possibility, said one, of such a marvelous fact. But you can see it and imagine in your own eyes' view of what that would look like, your own mind's view of what that would look like, that canopy to cover that. When you go to the Vikings Stadium, or you go to the US Bank Stadium, or you go to these other places and you see a man named Lampridius mentions that the men who would have worked this awning were dressed as sailors. They even had their uniforms. You go to the Colosseums of today, what do they have on? The workers have their own uniforms on, right? They're fitted and dressed for their job. They numbered several hundred men would run that canopy, that humongous canopy that would go over. At a signal given when there was fear of rain and the sun was too hot, there would be a simultaneous movement amongst the attendants. The cords would creak and the mighty sails would roll gradually to the center, each sail meeting in perfect harmony and forming together an immense sheet that completely covered the interior. Stranger still the fact that this awning in the time of Titus was purple silk, fringed with gold. The air was continually refreshed by the playing fountains, and an infinity of small tubes dispersed a shower of the most delicious perfumes, which descended on the spectators like aromatic dews. Now, the next question you might ask is, what exactly were the Colosseums used for? What was this mighty amphitheater used for? In a few words, games, games, and more games. Entertainment. The Colosseum was literally the center of entertainment in Rome. It was made for the bread and circuses in Rome. The theory that no people would rise up against the tyrannical government if they were given bread and circuses. If they were made happy, if they were just given their moderate welfare, enough food, enough drinks, enough entertainment, who would rise up against their betrayers, their captors, as they're being lulled to sleep by entertainment? The Bible warns us, be sober, be vigilant, for your adversary, the devil, is a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Sober people are not taken over. Silly women laden with sins and silly people that are distracted are taken over. Their country is stolen from them. It has turned from a country to an empire.